and you're ready to go. Have a good session.
Thank you. So welcome to today's first session of PKC 2021. This is the second session of PKC focusing on cryptographic primitives. I'm Christian and I'm co-chairing this session together with Lisa Kohl. So as in previous days, please respect the code of conduct, which in particular includes displaying your full names here in Zoom. In this session, we look forward to 7 important contributions to the space of cryptographic primitives, where each speaker gets roughly 5 minutes to present the result, which is then followed by 1 or 2 questions from the audience. And please ask your questions via Sulip, and we will then read them out. And if time allows, we will have more time for questions to all authors at the end of the session. So without much further ado, let's proceed to the first talk of this session. It's the paper with the title, A Geometric Approach to Homomorphic Secret Sharing. It's joint work by Yuval Ishai, Russell Lay, and Giulio Malavolta. And Russell is giving the talk. Please go ahead. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. So I'm Russell Lay. I'm going to talk about a geometric approach to homomorphic secret sharing. And as said in the introduction, it's joint work between Yuval Ishai and Giulio Malavolta. So what is a homomorphic secret sharing scheme? In our definition, an NMT HSS scheme is first of all a T out of M secret sharing scheme, where N input clients secret share the inputs to M servers. Out of them, T can be corrupt. But additionally, these M servers can evaluate some function on the shares and produce some output shares and send them to another client called the input client. And to capture even more schemes, we allow the share algorithm to produce some extra recovery information, which are also sent to the output client. So this deviates from existing definitions slightly. And we will focus on the evaluation of n-variate degree D polynomials F. And in general, we can think of a high supported degree D being correlated to a high communication cost. So we are incentivized to maximize the supported degree D while minimizing the communication cost. So in this context, we present 3 results. The first is a generic compiler based on degree K homomorphic encryption. These are homomorphic encryptions which are able to evaluate degree K polynomials. And this compiler turns a family of HSS scheme where the recovery algorithm is a degree L polynomial in the recovery information. And they could have high communication costs, such as in the order of n to the power L. And after the compilation, we get some HSS scheme for the same kind of polynomials for the same degree, but with much lower communication cost in the order of n to the power L minus k. So from another perspective, we can interpret this result as follows. If we assume that we insist to pay only order of n communication, then this compiler can boost the supported degree from 2m over t all the way to k plus 2 over m, k plus 2 times m over t, where k is the k of the homomorphic encryption. And the idea of the compiler is that we can push the k degrees of the recovery computation to the servers using KHE and let the output client complete the remaining L minus k degrees. And for the second result, we will extract some compatible information theoretic HSS schemes from the private information retrieval literature. And specifically, we are looking at the beautiful PIR scheme of Woodruff and Yekanin. Our extracted scheme will be parameterized by an integer L, a natural number L, and they will support a degree D equal to L plus 1 times M over T. And note that when L equals 0, we will recover the well-known Shamir secret sharing scheme. So the WYL scheme shares many components with the Shamir secret sharing scheme, but on top of that, the sharing and the evaluation algorithm will compute a bunch of high-order derivatives up to order L. And correspondingly, in the recovery algorithm, instead of using the Lagrange interpolation like in the Shamir scheme, we will use a generalization of it called the Emit interpolation scheme to take advantage of the derivatives. And finally, as our third result, we construct preprocessing MPC protocols from preprocessing HSS. To recall, a preprocessing MPC protocol is one that has two phases, an offline phase and an online phase. The offline phase is potentially expensive, but it only depends on the function f, but not the online inputs. It can be done by just a party or by another MPC protocol. And all this is, the goal is that with all this preprocessing, we hopefully achieve an online communication cost, which is much smaller than the description size of f, which could be as high as n to the power d. And to do this, we will use something called P preprocessing HSS, in which P out of the M shares are independent of the online inputs, x1 to xn. And for our schemes, we have P equals to the floor of T over L plus 1. And the idea behind this transformation is that since the P out of M shares of the HSS are independent of the inputs, we can generate them in advance and push the computation of P's HSS servers to the offline phase of the MPC. And again, assuming order of n communication, and if some conditions are met, namely L plus 1 divides T, then we can hope to get one more supported degree. So in conclusion, these are the results presented in this paper. And for some concrete feeling of how the supported degree D looks like, here are some examples. And finally, feel free to check out the ePrint version for more details. Thanks.
Thanks a lot for this nice talk. So I haven't seen any question in Zulip chat, but so also feel free to unmute now and ask directly in Zoom if there is a pressing question from the audience. Otherwise, we have prepared a question. So can you give, like you talked a lot about this pre-processing application. So did you think about a concrete example where you expect this pre-processing MPC protocol to improve over other approaches?
So I don't remember the full details right now, but in the paper, we have a special paragraph talking about this, saying that you can use this preprocessing MPC protocol as a building block for a bigger MPC protocol. So, and this bigger MPC protocol is used to compute arithmetic circuits with degree D gates. So each gate computes a degree D polynomial, and you can chain these protocols to, and high degree polynomials are, I guess, in general useful for a lot of purposes like machine learning, computing statistics, and so on.
This brings me actually to a follow-up question. So so what other functions could be of interest to you? I mean, you said it, low degree polynomials are interesting, machine learning, but so what other functions are there in the literature that might be worthwhile to look at?
I don't fully understand the question, but people have looked at other computation models. So instead of polynomials, they look at, if I remember correctly, branching programs. Other computation model and try to build HSS for them, or even arbitrary Boolean circuits, something like that.
Okay, thanks a lot. So any other questions from the audience? We would have time for at least one more question. Otherwise, we proceed. Doesn't seem to be the case. So thanks to the speaker again. And let's move to the next topic.
So then I will take over. Guillaume, you can already start sharing your screen. So the next talk will be revisiting RCCA security and replay protection. This is joint work by Christian, Uli Maurer, Christopher Portman, and Guillaume Rito. And Guillaume will give the talk. So the stage is yours.
Thank you. Okay, so hi, yes, I'm Guilherme, and welcome to my presentation on revisiting RCCA security and replay protection. This is joint work with Christian, Willy, and Christopher. So, security notions are usually designed with concrete applications in mind. However, they often do not match the exact security requirements of their intended applications. What is their purpose then? For example, what is the purpose of CCA2 security for PKE schemes? We know, on one hand, that CCA2 security is sufficient to achieve confidential communication. However, there are also non-CCA2 secure schemes that also offer this type of communication. The same happens with RCCA security. So RCCA security is just a relaxation of CCA2 security. Relaxation in the sense that CCA2 implies RCCA security, but RCCA security does not imply CCA2 security. So it is known that confidential communication requires IND-RCCA security. However, in general, IND-RCCA security is not sufficient to achieve confidential communication. So in this work, we identify technical inconsistencies with existing game-based notions, and we show that they are not implied by CCA2 for the case of probabilistic decryption. This actually contradicts a claim made in earlier work. Furthermore, they also have no non-operational meaning. So we show that CCA2 does not imply PD RCCA security, and as it turns out, it does not even imply the weaker INT-ST RCCA security. So we clean up the space of game-based security notions for PKE schemes for capturing confidential communication. And we do so by following a systematic approach for characterizing security using a composable framework, which essentially consists of defining different applications of PKE schemes as benchmarks, which are composable security notions, and we consider three different benchmarks. The first one is one I was just referring to before, and this one is taken from earlier work, and then we consider a variant of confidential communication, where this time the receiver is responsible for detecting and filtering out ciphertext replays, and finally, there is yet another variant of confidential communication, where this time it is a third party who is responsible for detecting and filtering out ciphertext replays. So we consider these three applications or benchmarks, and for each one of them, we propose a game-based security notion capturing the intended application. So for the first benchmark, we introduce in CIAL RCCA security. For the second, we introduce in SRP RCCA security, and for the third, we introduce in PRP RCCA security. So we show that these notions capture the intended benchmark. So CIAL RCCA captures benchmark 1, SRP RCCA captures benchmark 2, and PRP RCCA security captures benchmark 3. Finally, we give a full characterization of our game-based security notions. We show that they are correctly placed between CCA2 and RCCA security, and we also give all possible relations between them. For instance, we show that CCA2 implies PRP RCCA security, which implies SRP RCCA security, CIAL RCCA security, and finally, in CIAL RCCA security implies in RCCA security. And we also give the converse non-implications. So in RCCA does not prove CIAL RCCA, which does not imply SRP, PRP, and finally PRP RCCA security does not imply CCA2 security. So for more details, please have a look at the full version of this talk, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for the nice talk. Are there any questions in the audience? Either speak up or write it in Zulip or in the chat.
Yeah, maybe I can ask your view about like what is the practical impact of having all these different notions? I mean, why is this?
So the main thing is, I mean, there could be an issue with schemes which are just proven RCCA secure, in particular if their message space size is small. I mean, if it is large, then they're fine. But if the message space size is small, then there might actually be like mauling attacks that you can mount on them. So even though they are in RCCA secure, and one could expect that they could be used, because for large message spaces they can, for small message spaces there might actually be attacks on the malleability. Does this answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think one conclusion I would draw is that even for simple things like security of encryption, there are many subtle notions and differences, and that we should not expect it to be less complicated for more complicated notions. It's just that we haven't looked in as much detail. Is that a fair conjecture?
Sorry, could you repeat? Sorry.
So I said that even for things as simple as public key encryption and CCA security, there are so many different notions depending on what exactly we want to construct. So we should be kind of we should expect even for more complicated cryptographic primitives or protocols, there will be just as many complications, and this is kind of like a good thing to be aware of.
Yes. I mean, it's. I mean, at least I found it a bit surprising that like something as fundamental as like PKE schemes still has like some issues. And if this is the case for very simple primitives like PKE, then yes, for more complicated ones, I mean, one can certainly expect, I mean, more other issues to arise. Well, I hope not, but it might happen.
Are there any other questions? So I don't see a question on Sulip currently. Anyone else who wants to ask a question? We still have time. So we have a question on Sulip, so I'm just going to read it out. The question is by Daniel Apon. Is there a natural example of a PKE scheme that is more efficient or simpler to describe when designed to hit RCCA security, or another relaxed variant rather than designing to hit CCA security? And in brackets, I don't think this overlaps with the small message space example.
So the question is if there is like some PKE scheme which is more efficient if we only restrict to RCCA security rather than CCA2 security?
Yes, exactly. Or simpler to construct generally.
I mean, there are some that simply cannot be achieved by CCA2 security. So, I mean, on one hand, they're easier to construct because otherwise it's impossible. For example, for a re-randomizable encryption, for which CCA2 is just too strong. I hope this answers the question. Regarding efficiency, I'm not sure.
Okay, thanks. So I guess if there is a follow-up question, then please write in the chat. Any more questions? So maybe you already mentioned that there is a problem with the RCCA security that you have with small, like when the message space is small, because you don't get actually confidential communication, like your benchmark 1. Can you say why this is the case, or kind of what goes wrong?
So why benchmark 1 is not achieved for RCCA security?
Yes, exactly.
So the issue is that there might be PKE schemes which are malleable and still are in the RCCA secure. For example, if you consider the binary message space, then when you submit 2 challenges to the game, you just get, well, presumably one encryption of 0 and one encryption of 1. And then you simply are, the decryption oracle is very useless because it just tells you whether the ciphertext like is a valid ciphertext, in which case it outputs test, or if it is some bad ciphertext and it replies with bot, but otherwise it just does not help. So even mulling a text cannot be translated into something that allows to win the RCCA security game.
Yes, thanks. That makes sense. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Okay, so I think we can move on to the next session. Thanks again very much for your talk.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next talk is on group encryption. So please could the speaker, yeah, perfect. So this talk is about the paper group encryption, full dynamicity, message filtering, code-based instantiation. It's a joint work by Kuan Yen, Reza Favinaini, Willis Husilo, Hua Shong Wang, and Yan Hongshu. And Nang Seng, who will be giving the talk. Please go ahead. Probably have to unmute.
Okay.
Perfect.
Perfect. Introduction. Yeah, and I'm going to talk about fully dynamic group encryption, message filtering, and the code-based instantiation. And so first I will start with group encryption, then briefly state our three results in fully dynamic group encryption, message filtering, and the code-based instantiation. So first, group encryption was introduced by Kianis, and Young in 2007. And it is the encryption analog of group signature. And there are 4 parties involved: the sender, the receiver, the group manager who manages a group of receiver, and also there is an opening authority who is capable of identifying the recipient of ciphertext. Group encryption allows the sender verifiably encrypts message to a certified group members while keeping the anonymity of the receiver. And more formally, group encryption allows encrypting while the following holds. The ciphertext is well-formed and can be decrypted by some registered group members. Second, the opening authority can identify the intended receiver. And third, the plaintext satisfies certain requirements, such as being a witness for some public relation. And group encryption scheme have many appealing privacy-preserving applications, such as in encrypted email filtering, anonymous trusted third-party applications, and secure obvious retrieval storage. And so far, group encryption has been much less well-studied, and we aim to contribute to the development of group encryption, given its compelling features and nice application. And now I will identify several limitations of existing group encryption schemes. And the first limitation exists in user revocation, and the KTY model allows dynamic enrollment of new users to the group, but it does not provide any mechanism to prevent revoked user from decrypting new ciphertext intended for them. Even though this revoked user will expire from some misbehaviors, or they are retired from the organizations. So a formal treatment of fully dynamic group encryption is highly desirable. The second limitation is about the usefulness of existing group encryption scheme in the context of email filtering. So in all known instantiation of group encryption, the relations for messages are defined according to the computationally hard problems. And for example, the discrete log relation is employed in the KTY model for message filtering. And this treatment fits the definition of group encryption, but in our real life, it is hard to sample a witness to satisfy the relation. So can we design group encryption with some expressive policies? And third, regarding the diversity of concrete computational assumptions used in building group encryption, among all existing schemes, the only one that is known to be quantum resistant is the lattice-based construction. And this raises the question of realizing group encryption based on alternative quantum resistant assumption, such as, can we construct code-based group encryption? So we have 3 contributions. The first is the formalization of fully dynamic group encryption. And we realize message filtering with 2 expressive policies, and we construct the first code-based group encryption scheme, follow this model and these 2 suggested policies. So I will go to the first contribution. Briefly introduce the model of fully dynamic group encryption. Then in this, the opening authority and the group manager can run the setup algorithm to produce their public or secret key pair. And in this join and the issue, this is an interactive protocol securely run between a user and the group manager. And the user obtains own public or secret key, and group manager updates the group information. And our model enables the group manager to remove some users from the group through a group updating algorithm. So in this algorithm, the group manager advances the input and update the group information. And this is an encryption algorithm, and the sender can encrypt a witness for its chosen user. So in the proof and the verification, the proof algorithm is run by the sender, and who act as a prover and demonstrate the honest computation of the ciphertext. And this verification algorithm can by any verifier to check if the proof is valid. And also there's a decryption algorithm for the user to decrypt the ciphertext, and the open authority can anonymize the ciphertext. Next is the message filtering. So our goal is to equip our group encryption scheme with some basic yet commonly used policies for filtering. More precisely, we consider a public list S with S1 to Sk of k binary keywords, and each of them has a bit length T, and we want to test against length T substring of the encrypted message W. By the way, the list can be regularly updated by the group manager. Depending on the interest and the needs of the organization, all these keywords SI could be some good keywords or some bad keywords. So we can define two policies. In the permissive policies, we will accept the message if it contains some good keywords. And informally, W is a legitimate message if and only if there exists SI keywords, which is a substring of the message W. And all messages do not contain any of these keywords are rejected. And in the prohibitive policy, we will accept the message if it is far from some bad keywords. And the bad keywords can maybe corresponding to some topics that are illegal or simply out of groups' interest. So we will accept the message if it is far from some bad keywords. And here we want to make sure even the adversary changes minor parts, the bad keywords still recognizable. And how we model this? So we will make sure the distance between the bad keywords and the message is at least D. So in formal words, for every length T substring Y of the message and every keywords SI, their Hamming distance is at least D. And following the model of the fully dynamic group encryption and the policies we just mentioned, so we can have our code-based instantiation. And the main idea of our code-based fully dynamic group encryption, so at first, when a user requests to join the group, it generates its own public and secret key. Then he sends the public and the non-zero hash value D to the group manager. And second, to achieve dynamicity, we will following the updating algorithm. And third, when sending the message satisfying list either one of the two policies to the user, the sender will use the public key to encrypt the message and use the public open authority's public key to encrypt the identity. Also, the sender proves in zero knowledge that the message satisfies the given policy, and the ciphertext of the open authority is an honest computed ciphertext of the identity. And also this one is a correct ciphertext of the message and computed under some hidden public key, and we satisfy this constraint. So we construct the first code-based fully dynamic group encryption. So compared to the only known group encryption from lattice-based construction, and ours is more efficient since we use a microtree can seen as a weak form of signature. But our construction is still not practical due to the involvement of heavy zero-knowledge argument. So we have an open question is, can we construct practically usable fully dynamic group encryption scheme from post-quantum assumptions? So thank you for listening, and any questions?
Thank you for the great talk. So are there any questions from the audience? We have time for maybe one quick question. I don't see anything on Sulip, but also please feel free to unmute.
Yeah, maybe you mentioned that it has privacy applications. So I was wondering whether this is like doesn't need to be balanced a bit more, because isn't that essentially as a form of key as quo, or at least identity as quo? So it can be seen kind of as not necessarily being good for privacy to use group encryption. So I was wondering whether you discussed that in the paper.
Pardon? I'm not very. Yeah. So can you repeat again for the question?
So I think that, as I see, the goal of group encryption is to also allow kind of the identity to be leaked. So it's less private than just anonymous or key private encryption.
You mean compared to the key privacy encryption?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This one is allow the sender verifiably encrypts message to a certified group members, but this one keep the anonymity of the receiver. Yeah. But for the key privacy, okay, but this one, key privacy, but this one, the public key is hidden in this when we encrypting the messages.
Okay, so does this answer the question, Martin?
I think the public key is also hidden in key private encryption. So maybe this is true for both schemes.
But I'm not very familiar with key privacy encryption. Yes, sorry.
No worries.
I mean, if there is time, we can discuss this at the end of the session, because I feel we have to move to the next talk.
Okay, thank you.
It's quite time constraint, but we will definitely get back to this if there is enough time at the end. So yes, and with this, please, Lisa, go ahead. And the next speaker can already set up.
Yes, so the next talk will be, okay, thanks. Thanks for sharing the screen. So the next talk will be bootstrapping fully homomorphic encryption over the integers in less than 1 second. This is a work by Hilder Vitor Lima Pereira, and the paper is invited to the Journal of Cryptology, and Hilder will give the talk, so please go ahead.
Hi, hello everybody. So, okay, so for the fully homomorphic encryption schemes, nowadays we have basically 2 main families, okay? We have the schemes based on the LWE problem, which I guess you already know, and we have the schemes based on the approximate greatest common divisor problem. So we call this simply AGCD. And in this problem, the secret is simply an integer, okay? And then we sample uniform elements like here, we sample noise elements, and then we have the AGCD samples, which are of this form. So P times Q plus some noise. So a multiple of P plus some noise, okay? And the problem is, given these approximate multiples of P, we have to recover P itself. So the FHE schemes based on this problem are what we call FHE over the integers. Okay, now for the schemes based on the LW problem, we have FEW and TFHE, which implement a bootstrapping that runs in less than 1 second. But for schemes of this family, FHE over the integers, we have no such bootstrapping. So the goal of this paper is closing this gap between these 2 families of schemes. Okay, so I will now briefly present what I did in this paper to try to close this gap. So the first thing was proposing a GSW-like scheme that's based on this problem. So first, we defined a new problem, which we call RAGCD. And in this problem, we still have the secret P, which is an integer, but now Q and R are simply polynomials. They are polynomials that are just composed by the old Q and R's that we have for the AGCD problem. And then we randomize this polynomial with a secret polynomial K in some cyclotomic ring R. Now, using this problem, we can construct a GSW scheme that can encrypt polynomials M in 2 formats. So we can encrypt the polynomial M into another polynomial, or we can encrypt a polynomial M into a vector of polynomials. And then we define the mixed homomorphic multiplication that can multiply this ciphertext of these two formats. Okay, so this is more or less like the TFHE external product, and it's more efficient than simply using the GSW homomorphic multiplication. Now, the second contribution of the paper is what we called hidden approximate modulo switching. So we have the base scheme ciphertext, which is an integer C, and here we have R, which is the noise, and the noise is large. So what we want to do is to use the GSW scheme to compute the decryption function of this base scheme homomorphically. But this means that, that we have to reduce C modulo P homomorphically. And this is a problem because P is secret, and also in the HGCD problem, P is exponentially large in the security parameter lambda. So the GSW scheme cannot handle this. Okay, so what we do is we encrypt values that are close to these fractions n over P in the bootstrapping keys. And then we can use the bootstrapping keys to switch to replace this P here by this value N, which is public. So it's no longer secret, and it's small enough for the GSW scheme to handle it. So at the end of this step, what we get is a GSW encryption of a power of Y that depends on M. Okay, Y is simply X squared in this case. Now what we have to do to finish the bootstrap is to get this, to transform this GSW encryption that depends on M into a base scheme encryption of this format again. So here we have an encryption that is actually a polynomial, and here we have an integer. So to do so, we propose a functional key switching procedure. So with this procedure, we can take a ciphertext that belongs to a ring R1 and encrypt a message mu under some key. And we can output a ciphertext in another ring, encrypting a function of the message under a second key. Okay, so in particular, you see that if we set N2 here to 1, then this ring R2 is just the integers. And also, because we know some bounds to R and to delta here, we can choose M such that M of this power of Y is, sorry, F of this power of Y is M. Okay, so this means that we can use this general procedure to switch from a GSW encryption of a power of Y that depends on M to a base scheme ciphertext of M. So when we put all this together, what we have is this bootstrapping. We start with an HGCD encryption of M with large noise. We use the mixed homomorphic product of the GSW scheme, and then we produce a GSW encryption of a power of Y that depends on M. And this is the step that reduces the noise. And then we use the functional key switching to change the format and get back an encryption of M under the HGCD problem. Okay, so in this paper, we have adapted the bootstrapping from FEW and TFHE to FHE over the integers. And there is also a proof of concept implementation in C++. And you can find the source code on GitHub. Yeah. And well, if you think this is interesting, you can check the paper. And of course, you can send me messages, emails, and I will be glad to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the nice talk. This sounds very cool. So are there any questions in the audience or on? Yes, Russell?
Yeah, so I have two questions. So first, what are the advantages of schemes based on HGCD than those based on LWE? And the second question is that, as I understand you in this short talk, that you constructed a new scheme based on HGCD. So, but does this mean that the existing HGCD-based schemes still don't have fast bootstrapping?
Okay, so the first one is about the advantage of HGCD over other schemes, right? Well, this is actually a trick question. Huh? So the first papers that proposed schemes based on the HCD problem argued that you have advantages because all the primitives that you use are simpler. So for instance, you don't have discrete Gaussian distributions, you see, you just have integers. Maybe it's easier to do a constant time implementation, for instance. Yeah, but yeah, I would say that simply having schemes based on another hardness assumption is already interesting enough for us to work with them. Okay, and yeah, the second question is why I construct another scheme, right? So actually, I construct I construct a GSW scheme based on the HCD problem, because the GSW schemes that exist, they are not efficient enough to work with polynomials. You see that I had to encrypt and multiply polynomials, yeah. But yeah, of course, there are already fully homomorphic encryption based on the HCD, so you have schemes that can be bootstrapped, but not in this framework that allow us to bootstrap in less than 1 second, you see, with in which you have fast bootstrapping.
Okay, so those schemes still don't have fast bootstrap.
No, those schemes, the existing schemes are more like the GSW, so it's very hard to bootstrap. Or let's say they are like BGV, but not really. But you can see it's also hard to bootstrap. Okay. Bootstrap takes a lot of time.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Here's the question. So the question is, does the security of your scheme reduce to this new RAGCD assumption? Can we have confidence in the hardness of that assumption?
Well, yeah, this problem cannot be easier than the original HCD problem. The catch here, so this is for sure, but the catch here is that actually I used this problem to select these parameters that are smaller than what I would select if I simply had used the HCD. So this is the catch. But you can also prove the security under the HCD itself, but then you, yeah. But I mean, we have this catch with the parameters, that's true. So if you simply select the parameters, take into account the attacks against the ACD, the HCD problem, then you basically have to increase the parameters by a factor of n.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope this answers the question, and I think we should move on to the next talk for timing. So thank you again for the nice talk.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So the next talk is about the paper rate 1 key-dependent message security via reusable homomorphic extractor against correlated source attacks. It's a joint work by Gigi Lai, Fenghang Liu, and Zhelong Wang. And Gigi will give the talk. Please go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you for introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm Gigi Lai. My paper is Rate 1 KDM security via reusable homomorphic extractor. This is a joint work with Feng Hao and Zhao Dong. When considering security for encryption schemes, we always assume that the messages are independent of the secret key. However, in some special in some situations, the message depends on the secret key. In order to solve the security issue in this special case, the notion of KDM security has been proposed. And the relationship between message and the secret key can be generally described by a function class. In this case, the queries from adversary is modeled as a function f, and the answer is the corresponding ciphertext. More formally, the KDM security can be described by a security game between the challenger and the adversary. At the beginning, the challenger first chooses a random bit and send the masked public key to the adversary. Then adversary can conduct key extraction and KDM queries. Finally, the adversary responds a bit B prime. We see that the adversary wins the game if B equals B prime. In this formal definition, the class of function f is an important parameter, which is called the KDM challenge function class. There is also another important parameter, the number of n-bar of different public keys in the security game. In a more general case, we call this KDM n-bar security. There exist many PKE or IBE schemes that are KDM circle with respect to different KDM challenge function class and the number n-bar. However, all the schemes have a common drawback. Their information rate are quite small. So my question in this paper is how to construct a KDM circle PKE with optimal information rate. And the main result of this paper consists of KDM1 circle PKE with optimal information rate, KDM n-bar circle PKE with optimal information rate for unbounded polynomial n-bar, KDM n-bar circle IBE with optimal information rate for unbounded polynomial n-bar. In addition, the above PKE or IBE schemes is also leakage resilient with optimal leakage rate against the block leakage function. Here, I just focus on the first result, and others can be viewed as its extensions. In order to introduce our technique more clearly, I adopted the following framework view. First, this paper tells us that homomorphic WHPS implies KDM1 security. Second, Preprocessing et al. The paper tells us that batch encryption plus XOR operation implies KDM1 security and leakage resilience. Inspired by those two papers, we consider whether we can get much better KDM circle constructions from WHPS with additional structure and homomorphic structure. Of course, due to time limit, the detailed introductions of building blocks are deferred to a paper. In particular, with two building blocks, or basic constructions can be described in the following way. First, the cage algorithm is that run the center-up algorithm of WHPS. Oh, sorry. And the encryption algorithm is that run the valid encapsulation algorithm of WHPS and compute the ciphertext in this way. Next, through using the properties of the used WHPS and the extractor, we can prove the security of a basic construction for just one KDM ciphertext. Furthermore, with leveraging the correlated source security of extractor, we can achieve the normal KDM1 security. We also noted that batch encryption here is already implies the required WHPS. Next, we focus on each parameter. Clearly, for basic construction with this form of ciphertext, its information rate is 1 over lambda, and the KDM function class is a affine function. So it's still far away from our desired target, optimal information rate. Next, we try to improve information rate through using reusable property and block source setting. In particular, our first step is to replace the extractor with a reusable version. In this case, the information rate is 1 over constant. Our second step is to replace the original source with 1 in the block source setting. In this case, the information rate is optimal, and the KDM challenge function is a block source affine function. So next, we need to try to amplify the block affine function class for KDM security. In order to do this, we can encode the labels of a coupled circuit into the message space. Moreover, we can adjust the parameters of message space, to achieve optimal information rate. So far, and many more details can be found in our paper. So after putting all of our things together, we can get KDM1 circuit PKE for any bounded size circuit with optimal information rate. And all building blocks can be instantiated from DHLWE. Next, for KDM n-bar circuit PKE, we roughly adopted the following 3 steps. Finally, for IBE setting, we roughly adopted the following 4 steps. Details for detailed construction, please see our paper. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the audience? We would have time for a quick question. Please feel free to unmute and ask the question. Otherwise, I have a question. So you have these 2 main results. So one for public encryption, one for IBE, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
And the KDM security always involves some function class, right? So
yeah.
and they are different for those 2 cases.
Yeah, right.
Is there an easy explanation? What is exactly different, and maybe why even?
Here, for PKE, for PKE or function class can be set to be any bounded size circuit. And besides, we can achieve optimal information rate. And in the case of IBE, in order to achieve optimal information rate, we need to set a particular function class for optimal rate. And it's a little complicated, and it can be found in our paper.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think in interest of time, we already have to move on. Yes, so please could the next speaker already set up the slides. So thanks again for this very nice talk, and let's move on to the next talk.
Yes, I see thanks to you for sharing your screen. The next talk will be Impossibility on Temporary Resilient Cryptography with Uniqueness Properties. This is joint work by Yu Wang, Takahiro Matsuda, Koichiro Hanaoka, and Kaisuke Tanaka. And Yu will give the talk, so please.
Okay, thanks for the introduction. I'm Yu Wang. Today I will talk about the impossibility on temporary resilient cryptography with uniqueness properties. It's a joint work with Takahiro Matsuda, Koichiro Hanaoka, and Kaisuke Tanaka. Usually, when proving the security, we assume that the keys are perfectly protected. But in the real world, the adversary may execute some tampering attacks, such as heating up the devices and injecting bots to tamper with the keys. And then the adversary may observe the signatures or the ciphertext generated by the tampered key. So it can get some extra advantage from this to break the security. By now, there have been several positive results in the CRS model. In this model, the adversary can tamper with both the public and secret keys in any way it wants, but it's assumed that there are tamper-proof common reference streams. But it's still unclear whether we can have secure schemes in the plain model where we assume no tamper-proof CRS. In this work, we show that it's impossible to derive the tamper resilience of a broad class of primitives from any common assumption by black box reductions. Here, by a broad class of primitives, we mean several types of primitives, including unique signature, signature with unique signing key, randomizable signatures, and also PKE with unique message, injective one-way functions, and VRF. Here, by PKE with unique message, we don't mean the deterministic PKE. We mean that in such a scheme, for each ciphertext, all the valid secret keys with respect to a same PK will lead to the same decryption result. Also, we showed how it captures the crime-ship encryption and PKE with unique secret keys in our paper. And now I will briefly introduce our intuition, we will use the unique signature as the example. Here is our tamper resilience model. In our model, the adversary consists of 3 components: tamper, brick 1, and brick 2. Notice that the 3 components are independent with each other, and they cannot communicate with each other. Tamper can be treated as a selective tampering function, which takes as input the public key and the secret key, and outputs a tamper secret key, which is SK prime. Brick 1 takes as input the public key and makes a signing query, which is M. And brick 2 takes as input the public key, the signature generated by the tamper key, which is SK prime, and tries to forge a message and signature. Notice that this tamper resilience is quite weak, since we just allow the adversary to make only 1 tampering query and 1 signing query. But since we consider the negative result, the weaker the security is, the stronger our results are. To show the impossibility of the reduction from tamper resilience for any common assumption, we just have to show that the reductions do not benefit from having access to the adversary. So we consider 2 cases. In the first case, the reduction gives the only keys to the first component, which is tamper. In this case, the reduction has already known the secret key by himself, so he can sign the message in the forgery, which is M star by himself. And due to uniqueness, the signature generated by the reduction will be the same as the one generated by brick 2, which means that the communication with the adversary is meaningless for the reduction. In the second case, the reduction gives invalid keys to the first component. And since the tamper doesn't receive the only keys, it doesn't have to give the tamper keys, which is SK prime, to reduction. So in this case, the reduction learns no information on SK prime, which means that he cannot answer the signing query since he doesn't know the secret key. So the reduction cannot simulate the view of the adversary, and the adversary does not have to give a valid forgery to reduction. So the reduction cannot get any useful information from the adversary in this case as well, which means that this reduction should not exist. Otherwise, it can break the assumption by himself in polynomial time. When showing the strict proof, we have to take care of several points, such as that the reduction can make adaptive queries to the 3 components in any order, and we have to find a way for tamper, which is the first component, to check the validity of the keys. And we showed the strict proof under the framework of simulatable attacks defined by Weeks. So this is my talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the great talk. Are there any questions? If yes, then please just unmute yourself and ask, or post it on Sule. Okay, then maybe I will ask a question in the meanwhile.
Okay.
Can you say something like what happens if, for example, you allow random oracles as you have in BRF constructions? Do your impossibility results still hold, or are there known positive examples if you allow this, or what can you say?
Okay, I mean, for example, if the hash function, which is the random oracle, is part of the CRS, and the CRS is tamper-proof, then our result doesn't capture it. But if we treat the hash function as part of the public key, then and it's not tamper-proof, then our result captures it. So, I mean, we are not sure if there is any positive result if there is tamper-proof, for example, a random oracle or hash function in the public key. But if we allow it to be tampered, then the negative results holds.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Yeah, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on when your kind of result breaks down. So like when you don't have uniqueness, why does it break down? Why does the impossibility not hold for other schemes?
Okay. Uniqueness appears here. Here we will use the uniqueness to show that the signature generated by the reduction will be the same as the one generated by the adversary, which means that what the reduction receives from the adversary can be generated by himself. If the uniqueness doesn't hold, then maybe the signature returned by the adversary will be different from the one by the reduction. Then the reduction may make use of the two different signatures to do something. That's why the uniqueness is necessary.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, would be interesting whether it could be replaced by some other properties, maybe weaker. But yeah.
Maybe, I mean, as explained before, we can use the randomizability as explained before. If we have the randomizable signature, then the negative result also holds, since we can randomize the signatures. So we can randomize the signature generated by the reduction and the one generated by the adversary, and they will be in the distribution of the signature will be the same, which also gives the negative result, since the one given by the adversary can be simulated by the reduction. But I'm not sure if we can have other properties. That will be a good direction, I think.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much for the nice talk and also for your answers. And I think we should move on to the last talk.
Thank you.
Yes. So could the next speaker already start presenting the slides, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. So the last talk in this session has the title "Adventures in Crypto Dark Matter: Attacks and Fixes for Weak Pseudorandom Functions." It's a joint work by Jung-Hee John, Won-Hee Cho, Jong-Han Kim, and Jisoo Kim. And Won-Hee Cho will be giving the talk. Please go ahead.
Thank you for introduction. In our paper, we introduced a new direct statistical attack on weak PRF candidate presented by Bonnet et al. Using conditional probability with exponentially many samples. Bonnet et al. Proposed two weak PRF candidates, and we break both suggested parameter with special case. And also, we propose fix to prevent our attack. Their weak PRF candidates have many contributions. They are very simple construction. They just mix linear computation over different moduli, and they have low depth circuit complexity. They are first proposed depth 2 weak PRF candidates. And also, they are assumed to have exponential security. But these are constructed based on the newly proposed problem, so it is necessary to prove its security through various attacks. In this presentation, we present only alternative weak PRF candidate case. So other cases explain the uploaded video. So if you want to know, please watch the video. The alternative weak PRF candidate is defined as follows. The secret key is an n-bit vector which is chosen uniformly at random, and also the input x is n-bit. So they compute the inner product input and secret key for different modulus, and then finally the sum of them in modulo 2. This is very simple construction, and also they suggest the dimension n is 384 from the 84, which comes from PKW attack. Our attack is also simple. Let H be the number of ones in the secret key, then compute the conditional probability. The jth element j of vector input x is 0 when the output of PRF is 0. We prove that if the secret key jth element is 1, then the difference of conditional probability and one half is 1 out of 2 to the power 0.21 h. And also the secret key k is drawn uniformly and random, so we can assume that h is half of n. So therefore, if the number of samples is larger than 2 to the power of 0.21 n, then we can distinguish the weak PRF samples and random samples. So if we can get exponentially many samples, then we can then dimension n must grow from 384 to 610 to be robust against our attack for 128-bit security. And also our attack is just to average the samples, so we do not have store all samples. So we need only OM-bit memory for precision, unlike PKW attack. Then how to prevent our attack? Our attack only depends on the number of ones in secret key k. So to prevent our attack, change the distribution of secret keys from uniform distribution to the distribution of the secret key k whose number of 1 is 305. So it also withstands the brute force attack. Finally, our open question is how to attack weak PRF candidate when polynomially many samples are given. And also we use the circular matrix A to attack other weak PRF candidates. So it still remains the open problem when the matrix A is full random. Thank you for listening my presentation.
Thanks a lot. So we have time for some questions for you. So please feel free to ask them in Zulip or just right away here. In the meantime, let me ask a question. So your attack needs samples, right? And it needs a lot of them. Do you suspect you can also perform your attack with polynomial numbers, so an efficient number of samples?
I think
what's your feeling about that?
I think it cannot attack the with polynomially many samples. I have a lot of experiments about this PRF, but it cannot work.
Okay, so this brings me actually to a follow-up question. So you presented attacks, but is there also good news in that, so do you think the scheme stays at that level of security you figured, or do you think this was just one step towards better attacks in the future? So what's your?
I don't know about that.
Yeah, it would be speculation, but maybe might be that you see some nice follow-up or some further ideas how to to improve this attack even more. Yes. So any other question from the audience?
Yeah, maybe. Can you go to the previous slide, the future work slide? One was the question that Christian asked about polynomially many samples. Yeah. I was curious about the second point. I wasn't quite sure what the goal there is. It's a new scheme, right? Or
yeah. Bonnet proposed two schemes, two weak PRF schemes. So this is another weak PRF candidate. I don't explain in this presentation, but I explained this our attack for this candidate is uploaded video.
Mm-hmm. So do you have an attack on that scheme as well, or that's an open question? No, you don't, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess one question would be, what kind of matrices allow for an attack rather than a fully random one?
There in documented paper there is no attack for full random case. They are just some rationales for security. They I think that they said that it is hard to convert the rational polynomial, so they argue that n is just 256 is secure. So there is no attack for full random matrix.
Cool, thanks.
Great. So we are already time-wise, at least, at the end of this session, but I'm sure there are more questions around for all speakers. So let's thank all speakers of this session again. You did a great job. And so this ends this formal part of the session. But in case you have questions, I mean, now it's the break until the invited talk of Eike Kiltz. So feel free also to stay and then ask questions.